countries reflected by the Egyptian-Tanzanian collaboration in the construction of the Julius Nyerere Hydroelectric Power Project. Then we will move to Malawi, where the opening of the public schools in the country's two major cities was delayed to slow down the surge in the cholera cases. Also, we are going to be shedding light on these topics in our episode, and we'll start with this report where Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said that the Egyptian-Tanzanian collaboration in the construction of the Julius Nyerere Hydroelectric Power Project reflects the Egyptian commitment to development of the Nile Basin countries and demonstrates that cooperation between Nile Basin countries is possible with the right political will. The Foreign Minister asserted that bilateral relations between Egypt and Tanzania have witnessed immense progress over the past few years. He added that Egypt is committed to completing the project in accordance with the highest international standards. More details.
In a comment following the start of the filling of Egyptian-built Julius Nyerere Hydroelectric Power Project in Tanzania, Minister of Foreign Affairs Sameh Shoukry said the cooperation between Egypt and the African nations is important to reach the development milestone that serves the whole continent. Shoukry said that the dam was built using the latest equipment and technical standards. Shoukry was among an Egyptian delegation headed by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli that attended the inauguration ceremony of the dam's lake filling. He said that Egypt has the political will and capability to reach the infrastructure required, adding that the Tanzanian government made every effort to secure necessary funds to finalize the project. He also noted that the establishment of this project reflects Egypt's capability to implement huge projects in a very short period. Construction on the dam started in 2019 through a joint venture of two Egyptian companies. The project aims to double Tanzania's energy production, control floods, and improve agriculture. The dam total length is 1,025 meters at crest level and 130 meters at dam level, with a storage capacity of about 3.4 billion cubic meters of water in its man-made reservoir, which covers an area of about 158,000 square kilometers. The dam is expected to have capacity to produce 2,115 megawatts and 5,920 gigawatts of power annually.
To shed more light on the issue, we are very much delighted to be joined over the phone by Dr. Mohammed Amer, the coordinator of international relations and conferences. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Amer, and Happy New Year.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Doctor, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Sameh Shoukry, said that the establishment of the hydroelectric power project reflects Egypt's capability to implement huge projects in a very short period. What's your take on that about the Tanzanian power project?
Yeah, thank you so much. I believe this is a huge opportunity for the Egyptian state to indulge itself again into the African continent from the widest door, which is investment. The project itself is being implemented through a joint venture of two Egyptian companies. One is the Arab contractors company and another one from the private sector, providing, you can imagine that it provides work for 8,000 Tanzanian people and 1,000 Egyptian people and foreign workers, according to official remarks. The project itself proves the seriousness of the Egyptian state in repairing the relations with the African states and the African continent as a whole, especially those in the Nile River Basin and widely the African continent, which keeps putting an eye on the Egyptian actions and movements recently in the African states, which also shows how great the Egyptian step can be in a time of polarization from superpowers like the United States, China, and even Russia through the summits and meetings that took place with the existing appearance of the several African continents, states, and at the top of which was the African Union itself. Yeah, that's exactly what the Egyptian state, what the Egyptian state is doing right now.
Yes, Dr. Amer, from your point of view, what is the significance of such a project?
Yeah, sure. So let us say that His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi himself has repeatedly affirmed his support for the project as one of the mega projects to be implemented by the Egyptian hands in the African continent to ensure that is accomplished in accordance with the world-class construction requirements to serve as a leading model for constructive cooperation between Egypt and Tanzania. The project itself was described as an example of cooperation between the African countries regarding development projects, especially in the water and construction sector. The project is 1,025 meters long at the summit. It provides a lot of electricity to the African continent. So it's not only about Tanzania, but it's also focused on exporting like 34 billion cubic meters of water and electricity, which benefits not only the Tanzanian state, but also reach the goal of exporting electricity to other neighboring countries, which benefits the whole continent for sure.
Yes. How far will this project help in opening more avenues for the development in the agricultural projects?
Yeah, sure. So we can say that Africa is mainly an agricultural continent in the first place. And with the recent climate change negative impacts, which we discovered that the African continent became one of the most vulnerable regions. Notwithstanding, it does not contribute to any global gas and harmful emissions. So the project came to compensate the negative impacts of desertification and loss of billions of agricultural acres and land due to such negative impacts. And this reveals how the continent itself can look at Egypt as the big brother. And according to their brotherly relations between us and Tanzania, the continent is ready to open its arms to Egypt's crops and harvesting companies, agricultural companies, which will plant millions of acres to compensate what happens after the recent climate change in different states, which also reflects to the benefit of the African people in the first place and the African economy for sure, due to the revenues that will get back to the African nation after exporting such crops to the whole world.
Yes. What does Egypt have to gain from building this project, Dr. Amer?
Oh, believe me, this is a very good question. Egypt has suffered from long years of negligence to the African part throughout the last decades due to some political and economic reasons. But recently, and now Egypt is taking serious steps to restore and repair its relations with the African continent, politically, economically, and socially, through dozens of projects that aim at the end of the day to the benefit of the continent and the benefit of Egypt as well. And due to Egypt's role in the African continent, you can see how impactful the Egyptian decision in the African Union and COMESA, now Egypt is the president of COMESA as well, as two political and economic arms of the African continent. Yes, we are playing very, very useful, important role in that.
Yes. Sir, how do you view the Egyptian-Tanzanian relations in recent period, and how far the bilateral ties were developed recently from your point of view?
Surely, Tanzania is a country that is a member of the Nile River Basin out of 10 countries, the relations with which is essential and historical, which traces back to the time of pharaohs. But Tanzania especially has always been with those brotherly ties with the Egyptian state. And by the way, let me give you a very important information that most recently there was a voting competition to get the position of the president of the African Union Board of External Auditors. Egypt and Tanzania were competitors on this, and while votes were going to be divided by both countries, they agreed politically to reach to a consensus and agreement on having Egypt as the president right now, while the next round Tanzania will have the support of Egypt in such a position, which reveals how the Egyptian diplomacy can be decisive and brotherly with the Tanzanian state as one of the brotherly African countries.
Yes. Sir, do you believe that the success achieved by the Egyptian countries in this project will encourage other companies to invest and work in the African countries?
Yeah, sure. This is for sure the main objective of such dreamy projects. And after the success of the companies and the Arab contractors in such a huge project, I believe dozens of Egyptian companies will line up to investment in the African states throughout the whole continent, because it was revealed how successful the economic and social partnership can be with our brothers in Africa. Egypt now is also the president of COMESA, which can guarantee the seriousness of the Egyptian diplomacy, which will also push Titanic and huge Egyptian companies and partnerships to build projects in different countries, which will have another useful political action and also an economic and social development under the umbrella of the Egyptian presidency of COMESA.
Yes. What are the prospects for cooperation between the two countries in the coming period, Dr. Amer?
Yeah, well, after the success of the project of the Julius Nyerere Dam in Tanzania, I believe it's the role of the African Hayakarima or decent life in Africa to show more success widely and regionally within the African state of Tanzania. The project will be implemented in the whole country continent, but Tanzania itself is the foremost member of the River Nile Basin, and and it has a lot of reclaimable land to be planted and a lot of villages and rural areas to be developed. If this happens in such developing country like Tanzania, it will help decreasing the level of poverty and terrorism within the whole continent. It will surely reflect upon the economic and social steps over there. Not to mention the diplomatic and political role that is going to be played by the initiative of Egypt.
Yeah. Sir, on a wider scale, how do you level here the grade of cooperation or the level of cooperation between Egypt and the Nile Basin countries, and what are your expectations for these ties during the coming period?
Yeah, for sure. I believe since the president assumed his position as president of Egypt, and he proved very well that Egypt assumed the presidency of the African Union in 2018, and later on when Egypt did the same with the COMESA in 2022. So this reflects how committed Egypt is towards its relations with the African roots, that is very proud of having them. You can see how the foreign policy of the Egyptian state can be impactful in solving a lot of internal issues, such as the conflict in South Sudan, the problems in Nigeria, and of course, it plays a backyard role in reconciliating between neighboring and conflicting countries. This is the big brotherly role played by Egypt, and to which the African Union and countries really yearn to. And you can remember the days of the leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, and in the 60s, in the last century, when the Egyptian state managed to free or even contributed to the freedom of majority of the continent states from the European occupation and colonialism, which was a political role. Now we are playing an economic and social role through our initiatives and projects all over the continent.
Yes. Sir, Egypt recently did change its foreign policy to be more focusing on Africa and the African countries. What's your take on that, and what more do we expect to witness in the coming period?
Yeah, finally, after the success of Decent Life or Hayat Karima internally here in Egypt, Egypt now looks at the African continent as our backyard. This is the place that Egypt can have an impactful role. So now we are exporting a successful model of social and economic development to the whole African continent. So you have been a president of the African Union. Yeah, we are president of the COMESA. You can play an important role in developing your own continent. So we are so proud of our African roots. But you really need to change your vision towards the African continent. You have a huge continent. You can see that we have like 53 or 54 countries here in Africa, which is a huge number to deal with countries. At the top of which is Tanzania, for example. But if you are changing your vision towarding an important continent like Africa, you'll have a very huge development. And you can see that there are dozens of projects moved or initiated by the Egyptian state itself in different countries, which plays a very important role in development and even in implementing the UN agenda for development in 2023.
Yes. Finally, sir, what were the most important achievements in the African continent in 2022, and what are we expecting to witness in 2023? And indeed, recently we have witnessed the African Summit, which was held in the United States. So briefly, what's your take on that?
Yeah, sure. So in the middle of time, we have a global financial crisis. We have the effects of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict as well. We have a lot of problems and issues that are mainly socially and political and even economically here in the African continent. I think this is the prime time or the the most important time, the most suitable one, to have our hands together in order to develop our continent. So those initiatives, projects, those plans for the future of the African continent itself comes in hand right now in a time that the whole world has a very serious problem.
Indeed, Dr. Mohammed Amer, our coordinator of international relations and conferences, thank you so much for being with us and for your precious input. And moving to Malawi's government, that said that the schools in the country, two largest cities, are to remain closed until further notice due to the worsening cholera outbreak, while the students were due to back in classes after the holidays. More details in the following story.
Malawi's government said that schools in Malawi's two largest cities are to remain closed until further notice due to a worsening cholera outbreak. Students were due back in class after the holidays on Tuesday, but the health ministry said the start of the school term for primary and secondary pupils in the capital and the southern city of Blantyre will be delayed by at least 2 weeks. Health Minister said in a statement that postponement was due to the recent and continuing increases in the number of cholera cases and deaths. She added that authorities regretted any inconvenience caused by this late advice, taken solely in the interest of the safety of the learners. The impoverished southern African country has recorded almost 18,000 cases of the disease and 595 deaths since March, in what the United Nations has said the largest outbreak to hit the region in 10 years. Cholera is contracted from a bacterium generally transmitted through contaminated food or water. It causes diarrhea and vomiting and can be especially dangerous for young children. On the New Year's Eve, Chiponda renewed appeals to faith leaders to encourage followers to seek treatment, as some were avoiding care on religious grounds. Earlier in September, the World Health Organization, WHO, warned that after years of decline, the planet was witnessing a worrying upsurge in cholera outbreaks, with climate change adding to traditional triggers such as poverty and conflict.
Egypt announced the recovery of a sarcophagus, an artifact dating to 2,700 years from the United States. During a televised press conference, Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry announced that the green sarcophagus was reportedly smuggled out and put on display in the United States. He said that the artifact was superstitiously removed from the country and its recovery is part of the efforts to protect the Egyptian heritage. More details.
A sarcophagus dating back to the late dynastic period of ancient Egypt has eventually returned home. Officials announced Monday that the artifact, which was featured at the Houston Museum of National Sciences, had been symbolically handed over at a ceremony in Cairo by the U.S. charge d'affaires in Egypt. The handover came more than 3 months after the Manhattan District Attorney's Office determined the sarcophagus was looted from Abu Sir necropolis north of Cairo. It was smuggled through Germany into the United States in 2008, according to Manhattan District Attorney Alvin L. Bragg. Bragg said at the time that this stunning coffin was trafficked by a well-organized network that has looted countless antiquities from the region, expressing their pleasure that this object will be returned to Egypt, where it belongs. The sarcophagus, which is almost 3 meters tall with a brightly painted top surface, may have belonged to an ancient priest. According to Mustafa Waziri, the top official at the Supreme Council of Antiquities, it dated back from an era that spanned the last of the pharaonic rulers from 664 BC until Alexander the Great's campaign in 332 BC. In a decade, Egypt has recovered over 29,000 artifacts that were stolen and sold outside the country. The return of the priceless objects could enable Egypt to boost its tourism sector, which had yet to recover from the impact of the COVID crisis.
Well, with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition of Africa Today. I'm Rabia. Many thanks for watching.